Welcome, everybody. We're just going to give it a minute or so just for everybody to come dialed into the virtual space, and then we're going to get started. Cindy, how's it going today?
I am doing well, Reggie. I've been looking forward to this for the last couple of weeks, so it's great to see people rolling in right now. We have quite the large attendance and registration, so it's really great to have this moment. How about yourself?
I'm super excited. This is long overdue in terms of just getting everybody together and just really happy just the fact of the overwhelming response that we got in regarding this discussion today. So it's a very important one too, right?
Yeah, definitely this idea that, with looking at social media happening, all the kind of discussions out there, this is, due time to having this discussion around AI in the counseling field. And I'm so honored and just excited to kind of get this conversation going. So I see the numbers, people are still coming in, so we're going to give it a couple more moments. But welcome, everyone. We are so excited that you are here, and we're looking forward to sharing so much great information with you today on AI and in the counseling and psychotherapy realm.
And you know what's really interesting? This is the first inaugural session of the practice forum. So everybody that's tuning in today, at Yorkville, we strive to bring community together. And it's about information, insights, sharing, all that jazz. Because at the end of the day, it's about extending value to not just our current students, but also our alumni. And we want you to participate in today's event. As I mentioned before, we received a overwhelming response. We wanted to make this super interactive for everybody so that they could participate. And we're going to share with you in a moment how you can actually participate in today's session. So without further ado, we're just going to do a quick little video just to kick things off.
This isn't just a degree you were chasing. It's the blueprint for a future. You didn't wait for the perfect time. You made time. Some days were tough, but you pushed through every deadline, every day, because you're not built to settle. You're built to succeed. You didn't just chase a degree. You built a future for all of us.
Welcome, everybody. Again, we're super excited to get started, and we have some instructions for you. If you can, either scan the QR code or go onto www.menti.com and use the code 18348932. That would be greatly appreciated, and you could participate in today's discussion because we have some questions, some polls, because we want you to participate and get involved for today's activities. So we'll just pop that up for you again. So just scan that QR code or go on menti.com, enter code 18348932.
And as a quick note, if you're just getting used to technology and this looks a little intimidating, there's no need to do this if you still want to attend and kind of watch today's presentation, but it does add for the interactive element. So feel free to try it out, and we'd love to hear from you based on your involvement.
Awesome. So Cindy, Dr. Cindi Saj, um, you are the hostess with the mostest. So of course you're going to be taking, the virtual stage and delighting the people in this amazing conversation we're about to embark on today.
Yes, so it's definitely my honor and a pleasure to be here. I am definitely not an expert in AI, so I'm here as a host to definitely learn and to kind of share my knowledge and share the space. So thank you, Reggie, for that introduction.
Thank you. And who am I? Reggie Waterman, a brand director at Yorkville University, and I'm super excited to be part of this discussion. So thank you all for having me today. I'm your co-host. So for today's agenda, well, it's the warm-up. We got to get to know each other. So we're just going to go through a couple of prompts, ask you a few questions, just so that we could get acquainted. After that, we have an exciting keynote presentation by Candice Alder, and that's going to be 60 minutes. Then we have a fireside chat that follows with Candice as well as Dr. Cindy. So that's a 20-minute conversation, and then we're going to hand it over to the audience to participate. They'll give you 10 minutes for Q&A, and we're going to ask you when it comes to put your questions in the chat. or the Q&A box, I should say. And then after that, we have a faculty panel discussion because they're going to reflect on everything that Candice Alder has presented today, and they're going to provide their own insights and their expertise. And then we're going to wrap things up. Now, it's going to be a long session, but it's going to be fruitful. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be super interactive. So at any point in time, if you need to go use the facilities or take a quick break, feel free to do that at your own leisure. And don't worry, at the end of this conversation, we're actually going to send out an email just with the recording so that you just don't, miss every single detail.
Wonderful. And it's definitely a full packed, 2 hours. Looking at some of the topics that we will be discussing, I know a lot of you kind of came here with this as kind of the keynote around artificial intelligence in therapy. So what does that look like? What is that? We have an expert in the field, a really great thought leader, Candice Alder, to kind of break that down for us. We're also going to be talking about and looking at developments in AI within counseling and psychotherapy. So what does that mean? What is that? And what can we expect? We'll also cover some of the benefits and challenges for clinicians who are using AI-based tools. And then we're also going to kind of unpack and explore some of the professional and ethical considerations for mental health and AI.
Amazing. So now it's your turn, folks. Tell us where you're tuning in from. Where are you joining in? Alberta. Love Alberta. Calgary. Look at that. Edmonton. Shout out Edmonton. Vancouver Island. Look at all the people. And again, thank you all for joining today. We're super excited for you guys to have overwhelming, this is our first inaugural practice forum. So we're about building community, sharing insights. Love this. Love the
What I'm seeing
participation.
also is this is across, the United States, this is across Canada, and we're seeing how this is more than just, a Canadian issue. This is AI, we're kind of seeing it wrap around the world. So nice to see people. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to learning with you and from you today.
So tell us, what's your connection to Yorkville? Are you a current student, alumni, faculty member, or other? Look at that. Look at that participation from our current students.
I'm loving seeing that. And this is something that, in your classes, I'm sure you're bringing up. I'm sure you're kind of curious around, where does this take you with this education that you're getting right now? So this is a great topic for discussion. So thank you for making the time to attend today.
Love it, love it, love it. So when you hear the term artificial intelligence, what's the first word or emotion that comes to your mind?
Reggie, that's a great question. How about yourself?
The first word, scary,
Yeah.
scary. What about you?
Exciting. We don't want to be scared of it, and knowing that it's part of our life right now, and we can't put it back in the bottle. So let's kind of explore it a little bit and find the excitement in that. But yeah, with the idea of a little bit scary.
You know what? I like where you're going with this. You've changed my mindset. I am now super excited for AI because the evolution of things are happening rapid time, like in real time right now.
Yeah. As
So
we were watching this word cloud happen, this is technology, right? This is a little bit of had we not had the opportunities that we've had based on artificial intelligence, maybe we would not be having this Zoom right now. But you know what the fun part is? Candice is going to unpack it all for us.
amazing. No, thank you all for sharing your. So let's just call out a few things. So some people are saying helpful. Some people are scared as well, just like me. Some people
I
say
see efficiency on there.
efficiency. Yep. Innovation.
Research, knowledge, curiosity.
All good feedback.
Oh, and then I'm also seeing some unethical and cheating. So, there's a whole bunch of different perspectives and beliefs out there, and it's good to kind of have space for both of that because, as I'm saying exciting, Reggie's saying fearful, there is that whole other side of, yeah, the cheating, the exorcism, the, things to kind of be mindful of, and that's what we're going to be talking more about today.
Yeah. And then on a scale of 1 to 5, how confident do you feel discussing AI in the context of therapy? Look at this. Very confident for the lead. Love it. Love it. See, people are embracing this. This is good. This is good insight and intel too, right? In terms of how everyone's getting prepared for it. Okay. Thank you for sharing, everyone. So,
Okay, we keep circling around Candice, and who is Candice? That's what we're going to talk about in a moment. So Candice is our keynote speaker. Candice, we would love to hear your voice. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi there, everybody. First and foremost, thank you so much, Yorkville University, and everybody who's here today for making time to have this really important conversation. My name is Candice Alder, and I am a registered clinical counselor in British Columbia. And I'm going to just sort of deviate for a moment and give everyone a heads up that I had a house guest over the weekend that has left a lasting gift, and I've woken up with a bit of a tickle in my throat. So if there might be some coughs as we go along today. I apologize in advance. But that being said, I am, like I said, a registered clinical counselor in British Columbia. In my clinical work, I have been working with children, youth, and families for over 20 years now in various communities in BC, both in rural environments or communities rather, and urban communities as well. In terms of AI, I am also an AI ethicist, and I'm proud to say that I am the co-founder and the principal consultant with Synthetica. And what is an AI ethicist? An AI ethicist is somebody who's really, really deeply concerned and interested in the deployment and development of AI technology that is human-centered and centers around democratic values and human rights. So those are the kinds of conversations that I participate in. I am currently a team leader with the Center for AI and Digital Policies Fall 2024 cohort. We are just finishing up our additions to the Center for AI and Digital Policy Index, which is going to be published at the beginning of next year, which looks at AI regulation and policy adoption across the entire world. I'm also an IEEE certified authorized assessor of emerging AI systems for ethical compliance. So that is the background that I bring to our chat today.
Candice, I feel like we are in very good hands.
Thank you very much. I am going to get us started with our slideshow here. Bear with me while I share my screen.
We have an extra little guest today. This is my dog named Sunday. She's kind of popping in to say hello.
Hey there, Sunday. All right, here we go. Everybody should be able to see my screen now. Okay, so the way I like to start is leads a little bit off of some of the questions that were just being answered by participants, and that's kind of what do you know and what do you understand about AI? And in a lot of situations, this is what we hear. We hear sort of these really great stories in the media. This is actually something that came out just in September of this year, where they were talking about how AI has really helped healthcare in a Canadian context. And I thought it was incredibly important to point out a story that just came out yesterday. That again, this was in the Globe and Mail yesterday, and it was talking about how an AI bot has recorded a doctor's meeting and sent that information off to a bunch of people that were not supposed to have it. This is the reality of AI right now. AI is kind of all over the place, and certainly in Canada, we don't have any AI legislation that is specific to AI that we can follow. So it's a little bit like the wild, wild west out here. That brings us to let's talk about what it is and how we can do this in our practice in an ethical fashion. So, What is AI as a general statement? AI is, of course, stands for artificial intelligence. And at the end of the day, it's a tool or a system that is comparable to a digital brain that has the ability to mimic some aspects of human thought. Well, what are those some aspects? Well, we're thinking about things like recognizing patterns. AI is exceptionally good at recognizing patterns. It's also really good at making decisions. So it recognizes those patterns, it takes large amounts of information, and it's able to make those decisions. It also is able to predict outcomes. Some of you might have heard of predictive analytics or predictive modeling as a form of AI. This has really exciting possibilities when I think about it in the context of mental health. But this is another thing that AI is exceptionally good at. It's really important to remember, though, that AI is human designed and it's data dependent. Why do I take a moment to point this out? Because human beings have the ability to we have the ability to be creative in ways that AI just simply, at least as the technology currently stands, it just isn't at this time. So that's what AI is. And the truth of the matter is that you're actually interacting with AI every single day, and you have for a while. So you're thinking about things like your Netflix and your Spotify, your Google Maps. If you talk to Siri or Alexa, and certainly there are healthcare tools and chatbots out there that some of you may have used already. And it's actually already something that is integrated into our lives and has been for, I think, longer than a lot of folks realize. So AI has a lot of promise, as much as it has its ethical considerations and things that we should be mindful of. It does have a lot of promise, and it has a lot of promise across sectors. So thinking about things like faster diagnoses and treatment. When I first started talking about AI in mental health a couple of years ago, I was talking about studies that were coming out that were showing that, for instance, in mammographic screening, AI has absolutely been smoking radiologists in terms of their ability to be able to detect things like breast cancer at the earliest stages. AI has proven to be faster and more effective than radiologists in that particular circumstance. That was something that I was talking about 2 years ago, and I can tell you right now that the advancements in the technology from 2 years ago to today are mind-blowing. Assistive technologies is another one. So thinking about, I saw somebody in the word cloud come out with the word robots. And robots and AI are not the same thing, but we are absolutely going down a path where we're going to see those two technologies become integrated. And that can be really scary for folks because, of course, people think about depictions of AI in robotics, in popular culture, in movies and in TV shows, and it can be scary. But the truth of the matter is that I want you to take a moment and I want you to think about the aging population in Canada and the healthcare system, particularly the components of the healthcare system that are, in place to support folks who are aging. And we know that our healthcare system is struggling. We knew that it was struggling before COVID. It's been struggling even harder since. And when I think about robots and AI, I think about the opportunity for folks to be able to age in place and not have to move into extended care facilities that we're struggling to keep up with the demand, and we're struggling to keep up with staffing as well. The mental health benefits of being able to age in place, to be able to stay in your home as long as you possibly can when there's a technology that is available to be able to assist you. I'm really excited about those pieces. Climate modeling is another one. We're having more and more conversations these days about climate change and what it looks like, what we think it will look like. And climate modeling is a really interesting component of where AI can be super helpful. And of course, personalized education. Now, this is a hot button topic because, of course, we think about AI and we think about the use of things like ChatGPT to write papers and what have you. And while those things are worthwhile considering and thinking about certainly how we can ensure that those pieces aren't happening and that there's fairness that is existing, for instance, in testing and assignments, there's also really amazing opportunities here to personalize education for folks' individual learning styles and really be able to elevate humanity in that aspect. So, okay, so you're thinking about AI and you're thinking about how can I actually bring this into my practice? And the truth of the matter is that you have to start somewhere. So I want you to really start thinking about some core ethical principles, and these core ethical principles are outlined in the document, the Canada's first AI guideline for the integration of AI into clinical practice, that was released by the BC Association of Clinical Counselors, authored by myself. This came out in March. We are going to be looking at an update pretty soon because the technology has changed even since March in such a way that we're going to have to put some additions in there. But these are the core ethical principles that I want you to think about, especially when you're thinking about, okay, where do I even start in thinking about integrating this into my work? So we're going to go through these in a little bit of detail. But really, at the end of the day, we're talking about fairness. We're talking about accountability. We're talking about transparency. We're talking about confidentiality and privacy, and we're talking about competency. Now, these are going to be really important, not only from a clinical practice perspective, but I want you to also, as we're going through the presentation today, think about how this can apply for yourself, because we all know that clinicians, and not just mental health clinicians, but also other healthcare providers, doctors. You might have even gone into a telehealth appointment with your doctor recently, and maybe you were asked or maybe you were informed about the fact that AI was being used. But I want you to think about these not only as they relate to your clients, but as they relate to yourself as well. Because like I said, in Canada right now, we don't have any AI legislation. You can expect that that is something that will be coming. But until such time, there are no hard and fast legislative guidelines to be able to say what actually has to be done and what doesn't have to be done from an integration perspective. So let's jump into this, shall we? So the first thing that we're going to look at is fairness. So when we're talking about fairness, and these quotes that I have on the screen here, these are direct quotes from the guideline that was released by the BCACC in March of this year. So fairness means treating all clients equally and without bias, and ensuring that tools do not discriminate. So in clinical practice, we are thinking about using AI that avoids biases, that avoids discrimination, and avoids the creation of new inequities. So what does that actually mean when the rubber hits the road? Well, it means that when you're thinking about, when you're thinking about a particular AI program or an AI tool, you're going to want to consider whether the data used to train the AI tool or service in question is inclusive of data that represents your client population. So a really good example of this, because one of the most common tools right now is their administrative tools. So they can include taking transcripts of or recording your sessions, your conversations with clients, and turning them into case notes, for instance. And that's a natural language processing model. So that's an NLP model. And those models are trained to be able to recognize either text or listen to voices, and be able to turn that into ultimately its understanding of what happened, so that it can create your note for your clinical record. Now, if you're sitting in a session with a client that maybe is from New Zealand, let's say, and the model itself is not trained on a New Zealand accent, for instance, how effective is that model going to be able to garner effective and factual information coming out of that recording? So that's something that's going to be really important for you to consider. You're also going to want to consider whether the tool or service that you're considering is regularly audited for biases and seeking information on how often actually that tool is actually audited as well. So not only do you want to know, is it regularly audited, but you want to know how often, like what does regularly mean, I guess is what it comes down to. And the reason for this is because there's something called algorithmic drift. It's sometimes called model drift as well. And this is when a particular AI tool or model, depending on kind of the language that you're using to conceptualize it, it starts out doing one thing and it can end up doing something completely different. We're dealing with a technology that has the capacity to learn from the information that learn and develop from the information that it receives. And sometimes it can end up in places that we don't expect it to. So we really want to make sure that any biases are caught by regular audits, and you want to know how often your AI tool or service provider is doing this. You also want to think about cultural considerations. So thinking about mental health presentations and treatment preferences. So, what anxiety, for instance, looks like when we're thinking about that presentation in somebody who has grown up in a Western culture versus somebody who maybe has grown up in an Eastern European culture or in an Asian culture, or even, an Indigenous culture within Canada or from other parts of the world. What kind of cultural considerations have been integrated into the development of the AI tool so that you can ensure that the information that is going to be garnered from the AI tool or service that you're going to be utilizing is something that is going to be not only relevant to your client population, but is also going to be fair. And then, of course, there's thinking about things like diverse needs. So a really good example of this is maybe you have an AI tool that in your group practice, for instance, where, when clients come in ahead of their session, there are a series of iPads in the waiting room, and they pick up the iPad and they can log into their profile and they can do a really quick questionnaire just on how they're doing and how things have been going for them since their previous session. That information, let's say, gets collected in the few minutes before the session, and it pops up on the counselor screen, computer screen, right before they invite the client into the room, giving them some really useful insight on how to start the session with that particular client. Now, if you have clients with diverse needs, thinking about things like, for instance, folks who have visual impairments, does that AI service, for instance, or tool, does it allow things like a larger font size or higher contrast modes to be able to accommodate folks who have diverse needs who might be interacting with that particular program? So that's fairness. Accountability. This is a really big one. They're all really big ones in their own way. But when we think about things that could go wrong, and things do go wrong with AI, we know that. And we'll get to some of the ways that that we mitigate that, and the way certainly a responsible person who is using AI what they would do to be able to mitigate those concerns. But at the end of the day, there's accountability not just for you as the person who is utilizing the technology within your clinical practice, but also there's accountability expectations as they relate to the tool or the service provider. So thinking about accountability, we're talking about something like requiring the identification of a person or an entity who's responsible for the outcomes of an AI tool or service. So this is something that not only maintains trust and integrity, but also it ensures that AI that is used in mental health settings, that they're managed ethically and responsibly through a really clear understanding of roles and responsibilities. So what does this actually mean? Well, this means that when you are thinking about integrating an AI tool into your clinical practice, and let's say you have a group practice, or maybe you're part of a larger organization and your larger organization is looking at integrating AI into their service provision, you're wanting to think about things like internal reviews that happen pre-deployment. So before you put the technology out there for people to actually use. So this is things like ensuring that it's ethically reviewed and approved by whatever appropriate internal committees are necessary. Now, if you are a sole practitioner and it's just you and your private practice, then actually just the process of going through and asking the questions that we're talking about today really are that it really is that internal review because the internal committee is you. But when we're thinking about larger organizations, even governmental organizations, this is a really important step. Also thinking about ensuring ongoing regulatory and ethical compliance. So you really want to be assessing if, thinking about whether thinking about whether the tool or service that you're using remains compliant and acceptable for the entirety of its use. We're thinking about things like regular updates and audits here. What really this comes down to is that especially in Canada, because we do not have AI legislation, what is acceptable now is not likely to be what is going to be acceptable going into the future. Now, acceptable, what I'm talking about when I say acceptable is, I mean, legally acceptable under regulatory standards, right? We have these ethical standards that we need to adhere to, and that is a higher bar than the law and regulation. And that's a conversation that certainly exists in all areas of clinical practice, but it definitely applies when we're talking about AI. So the reason why I bring this up is that what you can legally sort of get away with now in Canada versus what you're going to be able to legally do in the future is likely to change. So if you are going to integrate an AI program into your clinical practice now, you want to ensure that that AI tool or service remains compliant with evolving regulatory and legal standards as they continue to come up. And of course, we talked about the updates for bias as well, but really at the end of the day, that's probably the biggest piece that is likely to change in a Canadian context. Broadly speaking, is really going to be the regulatory and the legal pieces when they come in. Now, also reporting and redress mechanisms. So a moment ago, I just said that we can expect that AI is going to make errors. ChatGPT, I think, remains, and to be so clear, I know everybody knows this, but I'm going to say it for the sake of saying it. ChatGPT is not designed for clinical use for mental health applications in any way, shape, or form. But that being said, using ChatGPT as an example, I think ChatGPT has about a 20% error rate. I think it continues to kind of float, in and around that area at any given moment. Even though that's not a tool that is going to be used in a clinical practice type setting, we want to think about, well, what does happen if something goes wrong? Or even if you're noticing something within the AI system that you're using that maybe isn't, deeply problematic right now, but you can see that it's something that could be problematic going into the future. What kind of systems are in place to be able to collect feedback and process and address and resolve those issues that get brought forward? So when you're thinking about integrating a particular AI tool, you're going to want to know what those reporting and redress mechanisms are. Chances are you're not going to be using a tool. And the difference between a tool and a service is that a tool is a standalone module or a program that you would purchase and you would integrate into your existing technology platforms. Whereas a service is something like Jane, for instance, is a service. They take care of all the audits. They take care of all the security. They take care of all of the updates. All of those pieces happen on their end. You are paying a subscription to access their service. And when you decide if you decide you don't want to use that service anymore, there's no sunsetting procedures that you necessarily need to have that relate to the model itself. There, of course, would be steps that you would need to take, but certainly anything like that wouldn't exist for you because you're paying a subscription to be able to use that service. So how would you communicate, for instance, if we're using Jane as an example, how would you communicate something with Jane if you notice something is a little bit off? Do you know that procedure? Do you know the process that you have to go through? Do you know how Jane addresses those concerns and resolves them? That's probably really good information for you to know. In fact, I recommend that you know it. And then, of course, there's human in the loop. So undoubtedly, if you have done any kind of digging into ethical or responsible, as it's sometimes being called, use of AI, you have heard the term human in the loop. So what does human in the loop means? It means that you are ensuring, as the mental health professional, at least in the context of what we're talking about today, human in the loop can have other implications depending on the sector, but certainly for mental health professionals, that you as the professional are always remaining in the loop of any and all AI outputs. Let me be super clear. It is absolutely your responsibility to review your clinical notes and your transcriptions for accuracy and completeness, and to use your clinical judgment for any and all AI recommendations. Okay, so just trusting that the output that you're getting from AI is factual and correct is highly not recommended. I can think of multiple examples of how folks have trusted the output of an AI and not checked it against their own knowledge and their own understanding, or even fact checked some of the pieces. This has happened a little bit in the legal world where lawyers have gotten caught out making references to statutes that simply don't exist. Deloitte just got into a lot of trouble with the Australian government because they did a big project for the Australian government, and it was discovered that a bunch of their references were completely and utterly fabricated because Deloitte had utilized generative AI as a component of their contract. So that was incredibly embarrassing because Deloitte is no small company. That was quite the hit to their reputation that they took. And from my understanding, the most recent information is that they have actually refunded the Australian government their money. That is something that I have heard through the grapevine. I have not fact checked that, but I do know for a fact that they got caught out pretty badly. And that is not just embarrassing, that is something that will impact your reputation. And that's just a consulting situation. That's not as it actually impacts human beings in mental health or in healthcare as a general statement. So transparency is the next one. So when we're thinking about transparency, we're thinking about, we're talking about the process of being open, or the practice of being open, being clear, and being straightforward about how things work. So in the context of AI, this really means ensuring that everybody involved understands how AI tools and services operate and how decisions are made and what the impacts are. This is incredibly important because transparency has a number of different implications. It doesn't just relate to the AI tool or service being transparent with you about different components that we're going to get into in a moment, but it's also really important because in order to be ethical in your use of AI with clients, it is going to be incredibly important that you are able to be transparent with your clients about the AI that you're using, which means all of the things that we're talking about right now. If you're thinking in your head, Candice is alluding to informed consent right now, you're absolutely correct. And in order to be able to ask for informed consent, you need to be able to provide that information, which includes not only you being transparent, but you knowing the information that you need to be transparent about. So let's look at this a little bit further. So mitigating, against the black box problem. Some of you may have heard this term before, the black box problem. What is the black box problem? This is the idea that the black box is the algorithm or is the model the AI model that is being used. We've got the input that goes in on one side, we've got the output that comes out on the other, but we have absolutely no idea what goes on in the middle and how that output came to be from the input that we put into the system. Now, this is something that is a topic of is a big topic of conversation all throughout the AI world, because as you can imagine, the stuff that goes on in the middle, that black box, in a lot of situations, that's proprietary information. Now, that's not necessarily the case with all AI systems, but certainly, you know, when we're thinking about some of the big models that are out there, that's proprietary information, and they're unlikely to be able to you're unlikely in some of those situations to be able to get that information. And until we have proper regulatory or and or legal standards to be able to say, no, you must tell us how these outputs came about, there's actually very little that you can do. You can't force a company to be able to release proprietary information to you. That would defeat the purpose of it being proprietary in the first place. However, you can mitigate against this problem. And what I mean by that is that when you're thinking about using a particular AI that maybe, for instance, I'm thinking about an AI program that hypothetically is going to be able to take your client data, which of course you have gotten informed consent from your client to be able to input that into the system. That takes that client's data. Maybe it's a youth that is suffering or, pardon me, struggling with ongoing suicidality. And based on your clinical sessions and maybe some self-reporting information from the youth client, that AI system is using predictive modeling, for instance, to be able to make some assessments about risk levels for that youth becoming actively suicidal. So in that particular circumstance, maybe you're utilizing a system that says, no, that's proprietary information. We're not going to tell you how it arrives at that decision. For the sake of conversation, let's just say that's the case. In that case, I would highly recommend that you are utilizing an AI system that is including confidence levels in the recommendations. That's just one thing that you can do, but really thinking about how you can mitigate against any of those black box problems is something that is going to be really important. Quite frankly, just knowing that that it's called the black box problem is a really good step in the right direction. Also want to think about the how, the why, and the where of data. What do I mean by this? So that means how and why data is collected and where it is stored, if applicable, and for how long. So why is this important information to know? Well, I mean, the truth of the matter is that, for instance, where your data is stored is of very, very important interest, particularly to Canadians. Right now, the likelihood that your data centers that are going to be holding the data that you input into any AI system that you might be utilizing in clinical practice are going to be in Canada is probably pretty good, because folks are catching on to these kinds of concerns. But there are still programs out there that utilize data centers in the US. Now, data centers are physical places, and if your data or your client's data, and it is your data as well, because if you're integrating this into a group practice or clinic situation, that's your information that is sitting over there. That, if it's across the border in the US, it is subject to the laws of the land. And one of the ones that I will bring forward is the Patriot Act, for instance. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to go into explaining all the ins and outs of the Patriot Act, but I can tell you that if you're not familiar with that piece of legislation, it actually gives the United States government sweeping power to go in and access pretty much anything that they want. And when we're thinking about mental health information, that's stuff that we really want to know where it is, where it's being stored, how long, and why that data is being collected in the first place. Again, thinking about your informed consent, you're going to need to be able to provide this information to your clients in order to be able to get what is actually informed consent from them. Because at the end of the day, their mental health information belongs to them, and they have a right to be able to decide if they want to consent to the use of AI in their clinical service provision. User data for training. So this is one that gets talked about a lot. Um, you know, some folks have really strong feelings about not having their data used for training of AI models, and some folks don't care. The truth of the matter is that it's actually a matter of personal preference. It's not like one argument is wrong or one argument is correct. It's just about whether that's something you're okay with or not. But we do want to know, if data is being used to train the AI that you might be subscribing to through your clinical practice. And really as well, what is the process of opting out or having you or your client's data, whether it's anonymized or not, used for AI training? So again, asking those questions and really trying to understand where things are at and what the process is for that particular service is going to be really important, again, for the informed consent piece. You know, at the end of the day, it's really, really important to remember that as it currently stands, it doesn't matter what sort of professional association you might be a part of. If you're already out there working in the field, generally speaking, it is broadly accepted that we put as few barriers in place for clients to access services as possible. And if a client does not want their data used for training an AI system, they have the right to be able to ask to opt out of that, whether that is the training itself, but they're okay with you using the system otherwise, or just opting out of having their information touch an AI system as a general statement. So another one is, who owns the data? It's, it's an assumption that you own your data, but the second you start engaging in service agreements and engaging with AI technology, that might not be as straightforward as you think it is. So really thinking about, how are you going to find out from this AI company who owns your data? Where is it collected? Where is it stored? But who owns it at the end of the day? And if the AI company says that, the anonymized data that we collect from you that is used to train our AI system therefore becomes property of us, well, again, that's something that you want to include when you're having discussions with your clients about this. So confidentiality and privacy. Confidentiality and privacy is a really big area, not just with AI, but certainly with technology as a general statement. So when we're thinking about confidentiality and privacy, we're thinking about, we're talking about the protection of privacy and the security of sensitive information. This is absolutely central in the establishment and the maintenance of trust and compliance with ethical standards in mental health service provision. But certainly, confidentiality ensures that client information remains private and that it's used appropriately within the therapeutic context. There has been countless data leaks and hacking situations. I mean, even just the situation, the article, sorry, that I brought up at the beginning of the presentation here, the one that came out yesterday with regards to the hospital. So I'll tell you a little bit of actually what happened there. that was the situation was is that the doctors or pardon me, the hospital would do what they would call virtual rounds, where all the doctors would come in and they would talk about different patients that they had. And because they were doing it virtually, it was connected to people's email addresses. Now, what ended up happening is that there were folks that were remaining on the, I guess, the calendar invite or the mailing list, however it was that they had it set up, that were former doctors, former employees of the hospital, and they weren't there anymore. And the particular situation with the doctor who actually not directly, but indirectly caused this situation to happen is that particular doctor was utilizing Otter AI, which you may have found yourself in a virtual meeting and seen that folks have popped into the chat and said hi and introduced themselves, and then all of a sudden there is an introduction of an AI transcription tool that is there, that is recording the session and that is listening and is going to be providing a summary at the end. A lot of these are being banned in virtual settings. And there's lots of different reasons why some folks do that or why some organizations do that. But in this particular situation, what happened is that a doctor who was no longer a doctor at the hotel or the hospital, sorry, had Otter AI connected to his personal email. And that personal email was notified of this virtual round situation that was happening because this doctor had not been removed from the mailing list or from the list of attendees. And unbeknownst to this doctor, Otter AI jumped into the meeting. Nobody noticed. Otter AI recorded the session and created a summary, and then took the next step of actually emailing all of that patient information that was discussed in that confidential virtual rounds out to countless people from countless different walks of life. And this is a really good example of how our clients, or in this case it's patients, but how our clients, they absorb and they inherit the risks that we take when it comes to our use of technology. Now, informed consent is incredibly important. However, I want to take a moment to also point out, though, that when you're sitting in a room with a client and you're asking for their informed consent to utilize an AI tool or service and have it touch their mental health information or even their just identification type information, you are speaking from a position of authority. And that might not be something that necessarily feels very comfortable, and maybe we wish that that was a little bit different than it actually was, but that's the reality of the situation. When you're asking for consent, you're saying, you are indirectly saying to that client, this is something that I've chosen to use in my clinical practice, and the implication there is that I think it's okay, and I'm going to give you all of the information that I believe you need to be able to make an informed decision, because the decision is still yours about whether you want to interact with it or not, or have your information interact with it. But at the end of the day, it's something that if I'm using it, I'm sending that message that I think that it's okay. And in this particular situation, it was even the doctor's personal, so not even their professional email address that they were using. It was something that was connected to their personal email address. And even though they accepted those risks in their personal life, it actually ended up translating to something that impacted the sharing of people's physical health information with people who were not authorized to hear about it or to read it. I understand that the hospital has changed their policies around some of the pieces that led to that data breach. But as you can imagine, that's kind of like asking for forgiveness rather than for permission. And, if it was me and it was my medical information that had gotten shared with a bunch of folks, I would be pretty upset. I'd be pretty upset that my information touched AI without my consent, and I'd be pretty upset that it was shared with people that it wasn't supposed to be. Anyhow, getting us back on track, let's talk a little bit about confidentiality and privacy and what that actually looks like in a clinical setting when we're thinking about integrating AI into our work. So encryption, you want to make sure that encryption is being used within your AI tools and services for data that is at rest and data that is in transit. So data is information, of course, as a lot of you folks know, but data exists in two distinct states. It is either moving between one place or another, so between maybe your computer and wherever the data center is, or it is just sitting there, data at rest. It is already at the data center, as an example. And you really want to make sure that, that encryption is not just taking place when data is moving from one place to another, because that's, of course, when somebody can grab it and look at it, some nefarious entity, let's say. But also, thinking about encryption when that data is at rest, when it's sitting in the data center, when it's sitting in, whatever internal system that you have, if you're using an AI tool, for instance. How are you protecting that information? And if you don't know what encryption is, encryption, very, very simply put, is information that has been sort of scrambled. It's like a jigsaw puzzle that has been completely disassembled, and there is a particular key that must be used to unscramble that information so that it's readable, or so that it's understandable. That's what it means to encrypt something. So we want to make sure that there is encryption for data that is in transit and at rest. Also want to think about access controls. So you want to confirm with your AI tool or service provider that if you're considering it for use, that they have robust access controls that restrict access to client information to authorized personnel only. Here's a really good example of what that could look like in real life. So let's just say that you are using some nameless platform, let's say. And this platform, you're going to put all of your client notes in there. It stores your client notes. It stores the billing information. It does all of the things. Very, very exciting. It's a one-stop shop. We love it. But now something goes wrong, and there's some problem with one of the clinical records for one of your clients, and you are going to call in and to the help center for this particular AI tool, and you're going to talk to them a little bit about what could be going on so that they can help you. We want to make sure that everybody who works at this particular, this nameless organization, shall we say, or service provider, that not everybody there is able to access client information. There are some folks that are going to be able to provide support with, basic functionality of the service. But if you have a concern as it relates to, say, a client file, there are special people that you need to speak to, because they have been trained, they have been vetted, and they have been subject even possibly to non-disclosure agreements. Almost certainly that would be a factor, and only those people are going to be able to open up parts of the AI system that relate to confidential information. So access control is really, really important. Not all of this information is always on websites when you're looking at and considering a tool. But I would strongly recommend that if you don't find the information on websites where you're, looking at a tool and considering maybe trying it out, that you give them a call. They should be really, really happy to answer any and all questions you have, particularly as it relates to any of the pieces that we're talking about today, but especially confidentiality and privacy. Security audits is another big thing. So security audits are different than bias audits that I was talking about earlier. So a bias audit, like I was saying earlier, is actually auditing the system to make sure that it is identifying it's identifying components of the algorithm that are appropriate, that it's doing what it is supposed to be doing. A security audit is different in that it's kind of like inviting someone to, under controlled conditions, to try and break into your house to test how well your locks work, right? So that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about making sure that nefarious outside entities or forces are not able to get in and access confidential information. One of the things that I think about is some of you may remember, this was a number of years ago now, and it was quite the scandal, was Ashley Madison. So the Ashley Madison dating site, for those of you that don't remember this particular story, was the situation where folks who were already in committed relationships could go in and find somebody to essentially essentially have an affair with. I'm not laughing because I think it's funny. I'm laughing because it's the irony that that they got hacked in a very big way, and that a bunch of personal information of folks who had profiles on the Ashley Madison website were put out to the public. That had pretty far-reaching consequences, I would say, probably for a lot of those folks in terms of their personal lives and maybe even their professional lives as well. You never know. But that's kind of what we're talking about. How hard is it for somebody to get in, to be able to access that information and to be able to hold it hostage over anybody in particular? Regular audits are incredibly important. If you are using an AI tool instead of a service, again, a tool is a standalone module or program that you integrate into your existing programs that you're using. You're going to be responsible for doing those security audits, but at the end of the day, most folks are probably going to be using AI services, so subscription services, and you really want to know how often those security audits happen. How often is recommended? It depends on the service. It depends on a lot of different factors, but generally speaking, twice a year is recommended. Privacy policies and data handling. So, does this AI tool or service that you're looking at have a transparent privacy policy and data handling practices? Can you find that information easily on their website? You should, and if you can't, that would be a red flag for me. But if you read the information and you don't understand it, or you can't find it, or you don't feel like it's good enough, I strongly recommend you reach out to that AI service provider and you ask them to explain to you what their privacy policies are and what their data handling practices are. And are those regularly updated to reflect technological changes in data protection legislation? Because as data protection legislation changes, folks need to change what their privacy policies look like. And how regularly do they update their privacy policies? When was the last time they did it? These are really great questions to be asking. Data breach notification procedures. So none of us want to think about this happening, but an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And what I mean by prevention is preventing the absolute panic that sets in when there has been a data breach, knowing what the procedure is that you need to follow. So when we are thinking about that, we are thinking about things like detection and verification, how to recognize and to confirm a potential breach. What are you looking for? Again, having these conversations and getting this information from your service provider is going to be really important. As a maybe a larger association, maybe you're part of a nonprofit and you're thinking about bringing an AI in, this is probably something that you're going to need to develop internally as well. Another step in that would be containment and investigation. So what immediate steps are you going to take to prevent further unauthorized access and assess the scope of the breach? Stakeholder notification would definitely also be a part of that. So who do you need to inform? Thinking about clients, thinking about regulators, business partners, and what are the required timelines or the methods that are involved in that process? And then, of course, there's the remediation step, which is going to be what actions are you going to take, or what actions does your service provider take to mitigate the damage, to restore security, and to reduce the risk of this actually happening again. Right to be forgotten. So this is not something that is getting a lot of attention in Canada right now, but I can assure you that this is likely to be something that is going to come up when our AI legislation comes through. And the reason that I know this is that there really is about 3 pathways right now as it relates to the development of AI programs. One of those routes is the European route. The Europeans have put in, so that's anybody that exists within the European Union, and I certainly would include, Great Britain in that as well, even though they are technically not part of the European Union anymore. They have put out a lot of legislation. I'm sure you've heard of the EU AI Act. It is a massive piece of legislation. There was actually just some information coming out just the other day about how there's going to be further shifts to that piece of legislation. The EU AI Act is hundreds of pages long. So there's lots of pieces that are going on in Europe in terms of, creating no-go sort of development, no-go use cases. So I'm thinking about things like the use of AI for facial recognition and social scoring. Those are some things that are a big topic of conversation and certainly are talked about in the EU AI Act. But really what we're talking about here is the right to be forgotten. So the right for you or your client to have your data or their data deleted from databases and to stop any further dissemination of that information. Okay, so what capabilities does this AI program that you're looking at, what capabilities does it have to be able to do that? And what is the process for doing it? Why did I bring up the European model? Because it very much looks like our current federal government is heading in the direction of the European model. And one of the pieces of legislation that exists within the tech space in Europe is the GDPR, so the General Data Protection Regulation. That is what that acronym stands for. And Article 17 of that particular piece of legislation speaks to the right to be forgotten. So that doesn't inherently exist everywhere, but certainly for any companies that are doing doing AI business in continental Europe or in Great Britain, for instance, they need to adhere to the GDPR, which includes Article 17, which means that once your information goes into their system, they have to be able to pull that out upon request, and for its system to completely forget you. And you can anticipate that this is something that is going to be coming out more than likely in our Canadian legislation as well. It's always possible that they will not, but I think that that is something, in my professional opinion, that's something that you can expect to see. So as you can see, confidentiality and privacy is a huge component. It's a huge section. And certainly the reason for that is that at the end of the day, it's a huge component of what makes therapy therapy, is that confidentiality and that privacy piece. So, certainly when we're thinking about that in the context of AI, it's incredibly important that that is a robust section as well. So really thinking about those pieces is going to be important. Competency. Now, I have not listed any of these sections in order of importance. So please make no mistake. I am not listing competency last because I think it is the least important. In fact, if you want to know what my biggest concern is right now when it comes to the integration of AI into clinical practice, it is AI literacy, which is competency. Are you competent in the tool that you're using? And I'm sorry to say that I am shocked every single day when I hear about healthcare professionals, whether it's doctors or specialists or clinical counselors. I mean, the list goes on. Folks who are using AI tools who are really not competent in understanding the power of the technology that they're using. So, I'm not going to, I won't read this section off the screen here because competency is in a lot of ways pretty self-explanatory, particularly for this crowd. We think about competency all the time in terms of our professional development. And I guess at the end of the day, that's one of the first questions you really should be asking yourself is, are you adaptable? The degree to which this technology has changed just in the past few years is astounding. The fact that I have already told you folks that the AI guideline that was released by the BCACC that I authored earlier this year already requires updates. That was March of this year. The fact that it already requires updates and you can expect those updates to come out hopefully very soon tells you that this is a fast-moving technology. And are you adaptable? Are you adaptable to the changing regulations, to the changing security threats, to the changing appropriate use cases? Are you adaptable to being able to move with this technology and really be open to change? Is really what it comes down to. What's your willingness to integrate all of this into your lifelong learning? So if you're looking at integrating AI into your clinical practice, then in my opinion, you really should be willing to integrate that into your continuing competency going forward. I think you can also expect our professional associations and our regulatory bodies to start recognizing AI training. I know they're already doing it with data security, but to recognize AI learning as a component of your professional development. And then, of course, there's taking steps to ensure the competency of others. So again, let's say that you are in a larger organization or you have a group practice and you have admin staff, for instance, that are using the AI technology. They need to understand what they are using just as much as you do. And if you're a clinic director, for instance, it is absolutely your responsibility to ensure that anybody that is touching AI in terms of staff at your particular organization has the competency to be able to use it, even if it is just the competency to know when they have stepped outside of their competency and they need further training. So how can you build competence and confidence? So I want you to remember that ethics are about values. They're not about coding. You don't need to be getting freaked out and thinking that you need to understand all the intricacies of how AI programs are coded, how they're programmed, how they're trained, all of these things that can feel really, really overwhelming. I say that from my own experience. You don't need to know this information, not when you're thinking about this from an integrating into your clinical practice perspective. Knowing the ethics is really important, and knowing your own values is really important as well. I encourage you all to take small steps towards building confidence. I did not come to the place that I am in terms of my understanding and my ability to assess AI systems for ethical compliance, or to be able to advise other folks on how to integrate this into human services, for instance, not just clinical counseling, but any human services at all. I didn't come to that piece overnight. If you are feeling overwhelmed, know that I felt completely overwhelmed as well. But my excitement pushed me through to take small steps to create a baseline of understanding so that I could take steps forward and really become more confident going into the future. At the end of the day, though, professionals shape responsible adoption. So the more that you can do to build your own understanding of AI, even if you don't want to integrate it into your clinical practice, you're going to bump up against AI in a doctor's appointment. There's no two ways about it. And I keep bringing this up because I can't tell you how many stories I've heard over the past, especially over the past 6 months, I would say, of folks walking into a doctor's office and there just being a sign on the wall saying, "We use AI here." They're not even asking you if it's okay. That's really concerning. That's likely to change. And I really want you to be able to ask the questions that are going to be able to put you in a position of feeling confident and feeling competent, and allow you to shape what responsible adoption looks like across all healthcare sectors. So I just want to take a moment and thank everybody so much. This is a really intense topic. And if you've come into this conversation today and you know very little about AI, or you only know a little bit about AI, you have just taken a very big dive into the deep end. And I want to take a moment and commend you for the courage that it takes to step forward into a world that kind of sits a little bit outside of what we're all used to when we're thinking about clinical practice. But the truth of the matter is that AI is not going anywhere. You don't have to integrate it into your clinical practice, but like I have said repeatedly, the likelihood that you are going to bump into it in your own seeking of healthcare, whether it's your mental health care or your physical health care or anything else. I mean, even banking, for goodness sake, that's the finance sector is the sector with the highest integration of AI services. This is going to be really, really important for you to understand. So I can't recommend enough, building your AI literacy and just feeling more competent as a general statement. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Well, Candice, thank you very much for sharing your expertise and knowledge. This is definitely something that you have said is not going anywhere. It's here and it's all around us. So I definitely was writing a couple of questions out as you were speaking, but I want to respect our audience's time and knowing that they did come here to ask those valuable questions to you directly. So what we're going to do now is pivot a little bit to address some of the questions that have been coming in throughout your presentation. So I'm going to pass it off to Reggie to kind of jump in on some of those questions. And we're here to learn some more from you. So thank you very much, Candice.
No problem.
Candice, like I took so many notes. Like I'm not even, I haven't enrolled in the MACP program and I feel like I need to, but nonetheless, this has equipped me. It's given me new insights in terms of how to utilize AI. So thank you for that. And we saw a bunch of reactions coming in. So how about we, as Cindi mentioned, there's a number of different questions that came in. So Gabrielle says, when it comes to doing the audits, how do you audit an AI for biases?
So that's something that if you are using an AI tool, so again, the tool being the standalone module or the program that you're integrating into your system, I highly, highly recommend that you have either on contract or somebody, depending on the size of your organization, somebody on staff who's a tech professional who's actually going to do that. So there are folks that is actually their entire sector of what they do is they go around and they do auditing. And it's not something that I would recommend folks take on themselves unless you have a data engineering background yourself. Like I said in the presentation, more than likely, folks are going to be utilizing AI services, so those subscription services, and you're going to want to know the really at the end of the day, the questions are really going to be around how often does their IT team audit for biases, and that really is just going in and taking the model and isolating it in a particular environment and starting to just ask it a bunch of questions, I guess is is really what the simplest way to put it, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, there's very technical ways of going in there and doing it. But at the end of the day, it's really just asking, asking control questions is ultimately what it comes down to, and asking control questions in a number of different circumstances and in a number of different ways to be able to determine whether there is a drift that's happening in the pattern of decision making for that particular model.
Okay, awesome. Christian has an interesting question here. So, considering levels of confidence, is there a way for a practitioner to know the scientific reliability of an AI model, like the p-value?
So, I mean, again, this is gonna be very much model dependent, and again, this is where your own knowledge and that human in the loop piece is incredibly important. You should not be using an AI tool for a purpose that you are not, number one, qualified to be using it for, and number two, a program that you don't really understand. If a confidence level comes at you, you want to be able to understand, what that actually means. So at the end of the day, like I say, it really depends on the model, and being able to understand those pieces. But generally speaking, models that give confidence levels are going to make their what's called a model card really accessible to you. So you're probably going to be looking at a tool, pardon me, a tool instead of a service. So again, that's that integratable module or program that you're bringing into your existing sort of tech space that you have. And you're already going to have a background in being able to understand those statistical analysis pieces. And you're likely not going to be running into proprietary information when it comes to those sort of statistical pieces, and that would be a conversation that you need to have with your provider or with whoever is selling you that particular program.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now Sonia has a really cool question. So, if we let the client know that as professionals we are using AI, with them not being educated on our capacity of using AI in their care, won't we lose clients? So that's part one.
Okay.
There's part two to this, so I'll ask you part two after.
Okay, sure. Yeah, no problem. So I think at the end of the day, that's where your professional responsibility comes in, that you are not using pardon me, you are not using AI systems, you're not using AI tools that you are not able to adequately understand, because we should not be just letting our clients know that we're using AI. We should be asking permission for their personal information, whether it is just their name and their birth date, their credit card information, if you keep that kind of stuff on file, or any of their client data. If you're using AI for transcription for client notes, we need to be asking. And you can anticipate that regulatory bodies, as they move forward and integrate some of these ethical components around AI into their own guidelines, they're actually going to be asking you that, because your client, just like you, does have a right to opt out and to not have your information touch. So you as a professional, in the same way that you should not be giving, for instance, you should not be doing CBT if you are not trained in CBT. You should not be using an AI system that you are not trained in it to be able to use, and that you feel confident being able to use. And this is why I brought up before that piece around, when you come into that conversation, when you're asking for informed consent, you are showing up in that conversation projecting a message that you have reviewed this, that you're using it, and that you're confident in it. If you are not confident in it, you should not be using it, is really what it comes down to. So if you are stepping outside of those guidelines, yes, you probably will lose clients, because when they find out that you're utilizing something that you don't understand well enough to be able to confidently use and confidently ask informed consent for, well, that's something that fundamentally damages the therapeutic relationship. So the responsibility really is on you as the practitioner, as the clinical counselor or the psychotherapist, whatever title you're using, to be able to ensure that you are confident. I wouldn't go out, I'm not a CBT person. I wouldn't go out and use CBT. Even if I spent an entire weekend reading a CBT manual and taking all sorts of notes and watching all sorts of YouTube videos on it, I still wouldn't do that because I'm not confident in being able to use that technique. This is no different.
Okay, that was great because like part of her second question was around like having that confidence in her abilities, right? If the
Mhm.
perception is, well, if I'm using this AI tool, they could question whether or not I'm competent to your point. So that's why it's
Mhm.
very important in order for you to be more proficient, understand the tools that you're utilizing so that you could be competent
Mhm.
and be confident in your delivery in terms of support.
Absolutely. And I would just say get out there and practice. You get out there and practice using a generative AI model. Get out there and practice using, a transcription tool. And, just have a ask your buddy, ask your bestie, go like, you know what, I just want to try this out. Can we just like record our coffee conversation? And then copy it, upload it into whatever program it is that you're using, and then see what comes out, and see and actually see how you would go about and go through the process of ensuring that that transcript or that summary is actually accurate. So practice makes perfect. It's no different than riding a bike. Just get out there and start using it, and you will eventually arrive in a place where you feel like, yeah, I can do this.
Cool. So we're gonna ask one more question here before we continue to transition. So Lynn asked or she mentions the example for Otter AI and the auto actions brings up good ethical questions about being an early adopter of AI tools
Mhm.
and unintended consequences. None of us are able to predict all the ways in which AI tools could act or be
Mhm.
used inappropriately. So how do we build those guardrails to mitigate any sort of risk and or liability?
Hmm. So I think one of the big lessons out of that particular situation is that you should be very mindful, and I am going to use the should word here. I know as clinicians we don't like using that should word, but I am going to use it in this context. You should be very aware of any kind of integration between your personal use of AI with your professional use of AI. So Otter AI, ChatGPT, these are not mental health AI tools. And as such, they should not be used in clinical situations. Um, if you're using your phone, for instance, to record your sessions, you need to be aware that what is actually going on with that information in your phone. I can tell you right now, I've got it right in front of me. When I use AI transcription, and I do use it for in a number of different circumstances, I actually went out and I bought what essentially amounts to be a dictaphone. It's not internet connected in any way, shape, or form. I am in absolute control of how, when, and where it gets connected to any kind of what I would call a hot device. By hot device, I mean something that is connected to the internet or something that's connected to a program that is connected to the internet. So you're absolutely right. We're not able to foresee these things, but we can use things to the best of our ability. You should not be using anything for clinical practice that is not designed specifically for mental health usage. And there should be a very clear separation between the technology that you use for your clinical practice and the technology that you use in your personal life. Because the risks you are willing to absorb personally it's not appropriate for any of that to be touching the technology that you use in a professional context.
Amazing, amazing. There were a ton of questions, Candice. Like
Fair.
I feel like the audience is waiting for like five versions of a TED Talk on this topic alone that I think you are well versed in, and we appreciate your time. I
Thank
think
you.
is there a way for our audience to get a hold of you or to reach out to you, whether it's LinkedIn or any other social channels that you suggest?
Absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn, and I can also be contacted through Synthetica. So as I had mentioned before, I am the co-founder and the primary consultant at Synthetica. And Synthetica is my company that is actually designed to fill this very big gap for mental health professionals in Canada, to be able to answer questions. So I can be reached through my website, which is synthetica.io, synthetica.io.
Amazing. Okay, perfect. So thank you, Candice. What we'll do is we'll figure out behind the scenes how we can get creative in terms of figuring out ways to address everybody's questions because the questions that came in were amazing, and I think they need to be addressed. So we'll figure that out after.
Mhm.
So appreciate your time.
Thank you.
This is absolutely fascinating area of discussion, knowing that this is very like leading cutting edge. This is all new. As we're hearing, there's no legislation. So it's kind of really like we are on the foundational of, the next step to what this does look like. So thank you very much, Candice, for sharing your information and your knowledge. And we definitely look forward to hearing more from you around some of those questions from our audience. We are going to now turn to our amazing faculty panel. So we have some people who are in the MACP faculty and the DCP faculty who bring a whole breadth of knowledge as well. Knowing that many of you are practicing clinicians who do use or who are trained in talking a little bit more about this or who have some type of knowledge to share. So we're going to kind of turn the tables a little bit and ask our faculty some questions. So I'm going to address the first question. We have Dr. Carolyn, Dr. Deborah, Dr. Avi, Dr. Amjed, and Dr. Shay. So I'm going to start with the first question to Dr. Carolyn and Dr. Amjed. How can we realistically integrate AI literacy and technology competence into our ongoing professional development, especially for clinicians who may feel hesitant or underprepared?
That's a good question. And I think certainly with what we've learned from Candice, there's a lot of things that we can do. I do think having those literacy models introduced at an educational perspective. Also, looking if you're a part of agency, having training days specifically around AI integration, doing some of your own personal training, but also bringing that to supervision as well. I think that's really important to be able to have those conversations, especially in some of the topics that Candice brought forward today.
Perfect. Thanks, Dr. Carolyn. Dr. Amjad, did you have anything to add around how you can kind of see our integration to those who may be learning or underprepared?
Yeah, thank you very much for, I think bringing up this important topics. And also as we see, there's a lot of question. Also, there is some uncertainty, but also there is a lot of excitement. I think in terms of literacy, first of all, I think we need to understand the limitations. As long as we are understanding and exciting to understand the opportunities, for sure, we still, I think, a lot of limitations. And as Candice said, so that there is almost 20 percentage, margin of error. So that's how we can deal that. So this is how we can also, connect that, to understand the responsibility, accountability versus the limitation that I think that spectrum happy to be one of the topics that we need just to give it more attention. And I think there is another for people who they are hesitant, how also we create, a lab now. It is our personal responsibility still talking also, or do we have to bring it to more, I think, systematic and organized type of work where we have, exposure, how we can benefit from accumulative knowledge here so that it's not just some person he has to try there and here. Why we don't think in terms of building that scope of literacy to start thinking about our own labs to train and to explore and to organize and restructure those kind of literacy domain. It's not just to because if I'm have a fears, so that how can I start, especially after we know there is still responsibilities and we can start by personal things, but how we can validate if we move to the professional level, we still practicing with significant part of safety and compliance as part of that. This is maybe something we need to look at it as well.
Definitely. Candice brought up this word adaptability and this professional development, lifelong learning, going back to the idea that AI is not going away. So how can we then use it for our professional development, and how can we not feel hesitant or unprepared? Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for those thoughtful answers. Looking at the next question, I'm going to just focus this on Dr. Shea. So Dr. Shea, in what ways can we maintain clinical accountability when using AI-supported recommendations or automated document tools? And how can we clearly define who is responsible when these errors occur?
It is a great question, because when we start looking at clinical accountability, there's a lot of ways that AI can support us. But when it comes to documentation and things like that, it's essential to protect our clients and to maintain those professional standards and ethical and safe practice and all those great things that Candice was talking about. And so when I start to think about clinical accountability and whose responsibility really is it, the first thing that comes to my mind is that the clinician and the therapist is the final decision maker. We need to look at AI as a suggestion rather than the end all be all type of thing. So in that respect, it's really important to clarify aspects and to be able to explain your rationale for why you're accepting or rejecting what the AI is outputting. If you say were questioned about it and someone came and said, why did you make this clinical decision? You should be able to say your rationale for that, whether it was AI based or not. You should still have those aspects for yourself. So I think that's really important, especially when we look at certain gaps or less reliability measures that AI has. And that's, say clients who are high risk or high complexity. It's really difficult for AI to start to pick up on those patterns when there are less patterns. So I usually suggest that the safest approach is to let AI suggest it, evaluate it as the clinician, then make a decision, and then be able to document that reasoning as well.
Excellent practice advice, especially for a lot of those, MACP students who are here listening right now, and how can they, move forward with feeling a bit more confident. So great answer. Thank you very much, Dr. Shea. Dr. Deborah, a quick question for you. How can we as counselors ensure that the AI tools we use are fair and inclusive of our client populations, particularly thinking about, cultural, linguistic, and neurodivergent differences?
Thanks so much, Dr. Cindi, for that question. And thank you so much, Candice, for this presentation. Also, hello, I see some of my students here. It's wonderful to see you. So this is such an important area around cultural humility and making sure that our practices, and to me specifically, that my practice is equitable and aligned with cultural humility and social justice. I don't have an answer to this question. I'm not sure that I can do that. What I can share is a bit of what's been coming up for me as I've been considering this, and Candice, listening to your presentation. So Candice mentioned that AI is human designed and data dependent. So when I think of this, I think about who is designing and auditing these AI tools. So do they share the same commitment to cultural humility and social justice as my regulatory body, as I do? What are the social locations and lived experiences and intersectionalities of the people who are designing the AI tools and who are auditing these tools? Is that something that we can know? How does their implicit bias come out in the AI tools? And I can share one example. I am someone who is really invested in decolonizing myself and my practice. So something I'm thinking about is how the use of AI might replicate unintentionally, might bring more colonization into my work based upon the dominant narratives that are being replicated by the humans who coded and audited the AI. So those are, again, some things I'm just thinking about. I'm also drawing on the work of this collective that I really appreciate called the Gesturing Toward Decolonial Futures Collective. I've been doing some really interesting research in AI. And they've highlighted, Candice, you mentioned the Patriot Act. So there's also been two new acts in the states that have come out since July 2025 that are really troubling in terms of that currently in the US, mental health, spiritual questioning, social critique, and existential language can be reframed as indicators of potential criminality. So this is something to be really mindful of in terms of our data, especially if it's being stored in the US. And just to keep being mindful of, if we're practicing in Canada, what are the current legislations and agreements between AI companies and the states in our countries. Okay, and then finally, what I'm thinking of, I have so much to say and ask about this, but just something else that I'm thinking of is that my clients are coming to me to work with somebody who has the values that I say I have. And particularly clients are coming to me to work with somebody who has the social locations, intersectionalities, and lived experiences that I share and present. So I'm just, as I am thinking about the ethics of including this third-party AI that is inserting a combination of unknown social locations, intersectionalities, and lived experiences, while also being a non-human element. What are the ethics of doing that? How can I think about bringing that in? And how do I think about explaining what all those implications are to my clients to gather some kind of informed consent? I'm going to pause because I have so much more to say and ask. It's so interesting. But that's sort of some of the things that I'm thinking of as I consider that question.
Deborah, thank you. And I think that additional consideration and taking the time to really think through these answers is what this forum is really getting us to do, right? Where, we are taking the time to slow it down, to pause, to reflect, to ask those curious questions, to see where the knowledge is going, to see, are we going too quick? Great, unpacking of that question. So thank you for that. I'm going to pivot now on to Dr. Avi. Dr. Avi, as new AI tools promise greater efficiency and insight, how do we balance openness to innovation with our ethical duty to do no harm?
Thank you so much, Sydney, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Candice, for your great information. So, as Candice was actually talking about AI as new technology, I was remembering the pandemic time, COVID time, when because of the circumstances and the shutdown, many of us started to integrate technology into our practices during pandemic. And then remember how it was very new for us and how we were all excited, but at the same time hesitant about integrating this new technology. And then our regulatory bodies and professional associations, they started to reflect on that and provide us with new guidelines about integrating technology. Now, I think it's the time for us as professionals in different capacities to sit and reflect on new maybe regulation or ethical standards for integrating this new technology into our practices. So it's really important for us to consult with the regulatory bodies, professional associations, consultants, colleagues, peers, and reflect on specifically important ethical considerations that Candice mentioned. But there's one that I want to specifically highlight, which was highlighted for us during pandemic in terms of integration of technology. And that is making sure that we are competent. And Candice already talked about trainings and stuff like that in terms of professional development, but also think about how important it is for us to make sure that we communicate the risks of using technology, like even going through Jane or any other platforms that we use, how important ethically it is for us to make sure that we communicate the risks that are involved in using technology, in using AI with our clients, and how important it is for us to be aware of that in the first place, to be able to communicate that with our clients and make sure that they are aware of the risks as well as the benefits. So I think that's very important part that we need to educate ourselves and reflect on that. I just want to highlight the importance of thinking about the cultural awareness, but at the same time, the language complications that may come in implication of AI, as well as issues and consideration related to age, right? Age of the clients that we are trying to use AI with. And the last thing that I want to highlight is I keep thinking, what would Rogers think of integration of AI into psychotherapy? And I'm so biased that I'm thinking he would definitely think about the humanistic core conditions and values of using AI with our clients. So keep thinking about how we can make it more humanistic and ethical in using that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're bringing up a great point around theoretic orientations and even thinking about psychodynamic. Like, how does that show up then with an AI chat? Oh, great thoughts. Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask the last question to kind of anyone who wants to jump in, kind of a round group discussion. AI regulation is still evolving. AI legislation is still evolving. So we're kind of in this beginning stage of what it would look like. So how do we, as counselors, make responsible decision in areas where the law or policy has not yet caught up to practice?
I'll just kind of jump in here because the thing that rolls around my head in this whole conversation is something we tell our students all the time. It's the importance of critical thinking, and that AI does not replace that. That is the human element of all of this. So we have to look at our ethics, we have to look at our modalities, we have to look at our professionals' colleges, because oftentimes legislation is behind where we are. That legislation is part of a big machinery that takes a whole long time to get people to collaborate and come up with a decision. So I think it's that this is the piece that AI doesn't have, that we as humans who fuel the AI, is that just because we've plunked in a few things into AI, that we just don't sit back and go, oh, okay, that sounds good. We do have that critical thinking ability to be able to say, it isn't evidence-based, it isn't true for my client, it doesn't meet the cultural variables for my client. So I think it's that, to be very mindful and to be present and engaged when we are using this technology, just as when we use anything else.
I can piggyback off that too, because I totally agree, Carolyn, in the fact that we need to be kind of proactively ethical if there are not just aspects that are laid out rather than just being kind of compliant to that. And so a lot of the times there's aspects of our job that may fall into a gray zone where we do need to use that ethical reasoning and consider our professional standards. And I think it also comes down to kind of some risk awareness processes as well, and consulting and really making our decisions and anchoring them on our core ethical principles, not on technology. And so remembering that it is that assistive piece for us, but we need to consider what are the potential benefits, what are the potential harms, what's the likelihood and severity of these aspects happening, and how can we mitigate any risks. And so really, in my opinion, if the benefits are going to outweigh any mitigated risk, should we be moving forward with it?
I can jump. I just to add additional. I think we need to map also the usage. The domains. We need to define the domains of usage first. Now I think we discussed the documentation, admin is assistant tools versus the core therapeutic. Assistant. Processing type of, so that we need define what area that we need, what is more less risky versus, the areas. If we are talking, for example, about the documentations or, case management versus, to make decisions. This is, I think, a huge, area that we need to be mindful about it so that we have to evaluate the risk based on the scope or the area or the aspect that we need to utilize it. And that I think will give more opportunity to test it more. If we are talking about the documentation, I rely more on the natural language model. Now, I think there is extensive use of that model in different contexts that maybe will provide data, more extensively than just to use it for solely aspects that related to psychotherapy itself, which I think that create, an opportunity to look at the reliability of what we are using across different, going back to the documentation, another way, that most now, I think it's become a trend now in the medical, I think, domain to talk about the documentation as part of the potential usage of AI. That I think will create, I think, some sort of landscape to understand better, to use different experiences to make, that I will not say a comprehensive, but at least reasonably ground to understand the experience better than just to keep, with isolation and I try just to figure it out by myself. So that this is one of it, how we can utilize what is similar, what there is a common ground between cross-disciplinaries and how, especially when you talk about medical sector, they are utilizing significant maybe resources to test that and to come up with framework. That kind, I think, of understanding of that problem will give us an opportunity to see what area that may be more safe rather than more risky to go down. Thank you.
I think that's a good point. I just think of in my clinical work, I go to my clients' homes, and some of my clients, my furthest client is 2.5 hours away. So I had an experience just yesterday where I'm relying on my GPS. I don't have a map in my car at all. I hit a dead zone. My GPS dies. I'm going to a client I've never been to before. I have no idea where I am. I have no idea how to get there. I don't have a map. I have no signal to be able even reach to my client and say, okay, how do I get there? So I think what that goes back to is we have to have that fundamental skill. I had the skill to be able to know, okay, I think this is north. I think eventually if I keep going this way, I will hit a sign that will tell me where I need to go, or I can go to a store eventually and say, hey, where am I? So I think it comes back down to is we have to have that fundamental skill and knowledge to always be able to then ask the question, because if we don't have access to this, where does that then leave us?
Excellent question,
And I
Carolyn.
made it home safe, so that's good.
Good. Yeah, no, wonderful. And that's, a great metaphor. And, you could have kept going without actually knowing what you stopped and asked. And, looking at that human, perspective and collective response to being a human, that's a great way to kind of differentiate artificial intelligence from human intelligence. Maybe as a last question, knowing that we do have a lot of students in the audience, how do you, as counselors, integrate that informed consent for the confidentiality of AI in your practice? If you're currently using it, how do you tell your clients that you're using it? What do you say? There's silence from this panel. We can always maybe ask Candice. If you want to jump in a little bit of how do you introduce, this to your clients?
Well, I think it depends on the client, to be perfectly honest with you. The first thing I do is I ask, what do you understand about AI? In the same way that we get baselines in terms of our clients' ability to cope, for instance, in particular stressful situations, and to better understand, pardon me, how we can support them. I think it's really important to understand what they already know about AI and do they use AI. There's the throat thing I was talking about earlier. I'm sorry about that. So getting that first understanding, and then talking a little bit. If I hear somebody saying, "Well, yeah, I've used ChatGPT," well, tell me a little bit about what you've used ChatGPT for, and that sort of helps me understand where they're launching from, so that I can meet them where they're at. If I am going to be working with somebody who really doesn't know anything about AI and is very scared about AI, then I'm going to approach it very tentatively. I'm going to say, this is something that I use with some of my clients, and I'd like to tell you just a little bit about it. But I want you to know, the first thing that I want you to know is that at the end of the day, if this is not your jam, you just need to tell me, because this is not a must do. I keep it very upfront that this is something that they can choose to opt out of if they want. If somebody's totally into AI, and they know a lot about it, then I'm going to jump into it with a little bit more depth right from the beginning, as opposed to walking folks into the deep end. So I think it's really important to know your client and to get an understanding of where they're launching from in the first place before introducing it. And just reading body language. I mean, some people absolutely recoil when you say the word AI. Other people lean in and go, "Tell me more about this. This is exciting." So just being flexible when you're having the conversation, and again, walking into that conversation with a good baseline of information, all of that stuff is the basis of informed consent. You're going to be able to react, and you're going to be able to present information in a way that is going to be digestible for that client, so that they can make that decision.
Thanks, Candice. And I do appreciate how we're wrapping it back to that humanistic approach, right? To offering artificial intelligence, we need to bring the human qualities into it, starting with the client side and all these really great themes that are coming up. So I'm sure we can talk for hours more, but thank you everyone for bringing your open heart, open ear, open mind to this conversation around artificial intelligence. I see Reggie's popping back in, so that means our time is up. So thank you very much. And Reggie, feel free to kind of close us off. But thank you everyone for coming here today.
I'm so impressed. So impressed. Look at all the reactions coming in right now. All the hearts, the claps. It's all because of you guys offering your insights and your knowledge on the subject. So very important. And thank you everyone for tuning in again. We're just gonna wrap things up super quick because we only have a couple of minutes. So if you could go back to Mentimeter, if you don't mind, we're gonna do this super quick. So scan the QR code or use the code that you see on your screen there to participate. So which of the issues feels most urgent for counselors to address? If you could submit your answers there. You're seeing AI literacy. It's the lead. It's in the lead right now. Ethical accountability was just neck and neck with AI literacy. Okay, so good responses right there. So it seems as though AI literacy is the most urgent for counselors to address at this moment. How prepared do you feel to integrate AI tools into your current or future practice? So not at all, somewhat prepared, neutral, prepared, very prepared. Not at all. Okay. Somewhat prepared. So we're seeing Candice, like there's some, like if you look at the very, very prepared, those are the early adopters versus the not at all, which is on the other side of the spectrum. So a lot of opportunities to help them get more competent and confident in terms of utilizing these platforms or tools. So in one word, what should guide the ethical use of AI in therapy? Humans love that. Love that. Clients, yes. Being human-centric is critical to success here. So competency, okay, this is what Candice talked about as well. Client-centric, critical thinking, love that. What's one word you use to describe today's session? Informative, integrity, okay, interesting, overwhelming, relevant, inspiring, amazing, good start. Yes, it is a good start because We're just at the cusp, right? We have a long way to go in terms of adopting this new technology and how to use it, thinking about all the ethical principles that Candice talked about. And of course, one thing that she mentioned in terms of how to elevate humanity in all of this, right? That's critical. So we have a surprise for you just before we close things off. Um, because there are so many great questions, Candice has indulged us to actually participate in a guest blog. So we're going to take all of those questions that you asked in today's session. We're going to create a she's going to answer those questions in a blog form so that, okay, because we don't want to dismiss them at all, because those questions were very pointed. And yeah, we want to answer those for you. So would you attend another practice forum on topics like digital therapy, trauma, and tech in neurodiversity in AI? Strong yeses. See just a small number of people on the fence, and that's okay. But majority, yes. And then last question, how satisfied were you with today's session? Very satisfied, satisfied. How are you satisfied? If you keep those responses coming in, that would be great. So on behalf of Yorkville University, we want to thank you for your engagement, your participation. We hope that you felt this was very informative. And listen, we got a lot more in store for you. So this is our first inaugural practice forum session. We're going to be doing these on a quarterly basis. So stay tuned for new sessions in the future, especially in the new year. And we'll be sending out a survey as well, just to kind of get a little bit more feedback and really hone in on the topics and items that you would love us to discuss. So again, appreciate your time. Faculty, thank you so much for your time, your energy, and Candice, a wealth of knowledge in this space. So appreciate everything that you've done today. And the hostess with the mostest, Dr. Cindi, crushed it. Did an amazing job.
My pleasure and honor. Thank you everyone for showing up today, and I look forward to the next one. Have a great day, everyone.
Take care.